Hey guys! This next video will be about how to make yeast. I know there are many of you who do not have yeast and you're not able to find it in the stores right now. So this is a great video for me to post to help you, because how will you make your bread without yeast? Okay, so there's 3 different ways that we can make yeast from home. If you have a potato, we can make it from that. If you have fruit or raisins, we can make it from that. And if you have regular and whole grain flour, we can make it from that. All right, so you may not know this, but yeast is actually a great probiotic. So it helps with digestive health, it can help with Crohn's disease, it can even help with diarrhea. Yeast is full of B vitamins and it also has protein in it. So yeast is very healthy. It's also an immune system booster, which we all can use right now, right? So one last thing that yeast does is it helps regulate blood sugar levels. So yeast is very healthy. You might as well use it more often. Okay, so the first yeast I'm going to teach you how to make is potato yeast. What you're going to need is a saucepan like this. This is what I'm going to use. 1 unpeeled potato, and we're going to wash it a little bit, but don't scrub it, or you're going to ruin the properties that are in the skin, okay? So I'm going to rinse this potato. All right, this is good enough. There's no dirt. We're going to need 4 cups of warm water. So I'm going to measure it up in this. 4 cups is equal to 1 quart. So 1 cup is 8 ounces. A quart is 32 ounces. All right, so I have my water here. You're going to need 1 teaspoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of sugar, and then you'll need a quart jar. Now, this is about how big a quart is. There are 4 quarts and a gallon of milk. So think of 1/4 of a gallon. So this is just an old juice bottle that I happen to have. It does say on here, it's 33.8 fluid ounces, so 1.05 quart. So this will work for me. I did sanitize it and clean it, so it's good to go. All right. Once you have rinsed your potato, you'll want to cut it so that it's easier to cook. So I'm just going to cut it into little cubes, just like I would for mashed potatoes. So basically like this small. I'm going to put it into my saucepan. All right, my knife didn't go all the way through, so I had to just pull it apart. All right, now what we're going to do is cook it with this water until it's tender. Now you know when the potato is tender, when you can easily put a fork through it. That's when it's tender. So while we wait for the potato to cook, let's move on to our fruit yeast. That way you're not waiting and waiting and waiting. Okay, so for fruit yeast, you know what? Fruit yeast is usually used to make bread. I don't even know what else you would use yeast for, but that's just something that it said, so I thought I would share that with you. But I'm gonna need to figure out what else you would use to make yeast, or yeah. Anyway, fruit yeast is good for bread because it has a nice aromatic flavor. The fruits that you want to use are like oranges, apples, raisins. I don't have raisins, but I do have grapes, and it's kind of the same thing. So I'm cutting up some grapes right now. You do not want to use kiwi or pineapple because they're highly acidic and it just doesn't turn out right. So make sure you don't use those. You'll get bad results, okay? So you are going to need 3 to 4 tablespoons of fresh fruit. So I'm going to put my fresh fruit in here. Barking dog. So there's 1, 2, 3. I am doing heaping tablespoons, which is fine. And I'm going to do 4, just to err on the side of caution. I'd rather have 4 tablespoons than 3. So here's my 4th one. I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. Okay, so now we're going to take the fruit and we're going to put it into a jar. I have like an old pasta sauce jar that I cleaned out, so that'll work just fine. Make sure that your jars are sanitized, okay? Clean them and sanitize them. So I have my grapes in there. Now we're going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar. So this is a tablespoon, and here's some sugar. So let's add 2 tablespoons of sugar into here. This sugar is going to help speed up the fermentation process, which creates your yeast. So we have our sugar in here. Now we're going to fill the jar up until it's 3/4 full of water. So let me grab some water and I'll show you what that's going to look like. Imagine that the jar is divided into 4 portions and fill up 3 of those portions. So if the jar, half of the jar is about to here, so 3/4 would be about to here. So we're going to fill it up to about there. So I've got my fruit and my sugar on the bottom, and then I filled it 3/4 of the way with water. Now what we're gonna do is loosely cover it. You don't wanna cover it really tight because you need air to be able to get in. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosely cover it, but make sure that there is space for the air to get out. So this is just gonna go on your counter and sit here at room temperature for several days. Now, once you see bubbles and you notice like a wine scent, like a fermented scent, then it's ready to go. Once it's ready to go, you can store it in the fridge and use it as needed. So just so you know, if you're going to use fresh yeast that you made, the substitution for dry yeast is 2 to 1. So say it's 1 packet of dry yeast is 2 1/4 teaspoon. Okay, so that means you're going to use 4 1/2 teaspoon of your fresh yeast in place of 1 packet of dry yeast. All right, make sense? Okay, so now we have one ready. The potatoes aren't quite boiling, but I do need to grab a fork to make sure they're tender. And let's move on to our sourdough starter. Now the sourdough starter is the most difficult and time consuming, so I wouldn't recommend it unless you really like sourdough, which I do, so I'll do it. But I'm not going to be able to show you the whole process right now because it is a long process. Okay, so we are going to need 1 cup of whole wheat flour, 1/2 cup of cold water, and then the feed. So anytime that I tell you you need to feed your yeast starter, the feed consists of 1 cup of regular white flour and 1/2 cup of cool water. It's going to be cool water if your house is warm and lukewarm water if your house is cold. And if your house is in between, I don't know, you guess. You do what you want to do. All right, so we are going to combine the flour and the water. So 1 cup of whole wheat flour, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in here. So I have a 1/2 cup right here. So here's 1/2 and 1, and this is my whole wheat flour. I put it in my regular flour bag so I don't get bugs, but this is the whole wheat flour from the other day. And then we need 1 cup of flour. Combine your flour and water. So it's the whole wheat flour and then just 1/2 cup of cold water, I guess. I haven't made this before, so I'm learning with you. So 1 cup of flour, 1/2 cup of water. And I think I want to get a spoon to stir this. So our potatoes are boiling over there. We'll let them boil a little longer. So I'm gonna stir this. Make sure I get that flour wet. We don't want to have any dry flour. Okay, so now that I have this, I'm going to go ahead and feed it. So the feed is 1 cup of regular flour, remember? So I have regular flour right here. This is white flour. So I'll do 1, 2. Put that away. And then we need 1/2 cup of water again. So here's 1/2 cup of water. Ah, perfect. It was meant to be. Then we are going to combine that. So we have our whole wheat flour plus our feed. Now every time you do your feed, remember that that's regular white flour, okay? I don't know if you like sourdough like I do, but sourdough pancakes are really good, sourdough French toast, and of course sourdough bread, sourdough grilled cheese sandwiches. If you've been to San Francisco, they have the Boudin factory, and Boudin is a well-known sourdough store, restaurant, factory, and you can see them making the sourdough bread from hand. They shape it into fun things like crabs and turtles, and at Disneyland they'll shape them into like Mickey Mouse heads. So I am a big fan of sourdough. My mother is not. Okay, so I have it looking like this. Now what we're going to do is just set it at room temperature. I'm going to go ahead and cover it loosely as well. Make sure that the air can get in. Saran wrap is sometimes difficult to deal with, but anyway, you don't need to keep the air out because you want the fermentation process to happen. So, all right, now I'm going to tell you what's going to happen for the next 6 days, okay? This is going to take you 6 days, so sourdough takes quite a long time. You're going to, okay, this should change a little bit, maybe. You're going to throw away half of this, throw it away. I know that that doesn't sound very nice. What you could do instead of throwing it away is give the discard starter to a friend so they can make their own starter as well. Or you can use it to make certain baking goods. So you have to look and make sure it's specifically for discard yeast, okay? Some pretzels, waffles, chocolate cake can use discard yeast and still be a successful recipe. So that's what you can do to avoid waste. But it's important that you do take out the starter that I tell you to take out and get rid of it, because getting rid of that offers the yeast that's in here more food, so it will thrive better, okay? So you're going to let this sit at room temperature for 24 hours. And then on day 2, you're gonna throw away half of the starter, which is 4 ounces or half a cup. Then you're going to add in the feed. Remember, 1 cup of flour, 1/2 cup of water, mix it, cover it, let it sit for another 24 hours. Okay, now by day 3, it should be bubbling. It should have a fresh fruity aroma. You're going to start feeding it twice per day. So remember, a feeding is 1 cup of flour, 1/2 cup of water. And each time that you feed it, make sure that you take out, this is new, okay? Take out 4 ounces, keep that 4 ounces, throw away the rest, or use it to make the special recipes we talked about, the pretzels, the cake. Give it to a friend and they can make their own starter and start feeding that, okay? Now you're going to mix it, let it rest for 12 hours at room temperature, and repeat. So remember, we're feeding it twice per day. So now it's every 12 hours. All right, now on day number 4, you're going to once again weigh out 4 ounces of the starter, throw away the rest, feed it. Remember, 1 cup of flour, 1/2 cup of water, mix it, let it rest at room temperature for 12 hours. Okay, now by day number 6, your starter should be doubled in size. It should have a lot of bubbles and a tangy aroma. So you're going to give it 1 last feeding, mix it up, then take 4 ounces, discard the rest or put that in your baked goods or give it to your friends. Just remember your social distancing. And then what you're gonna do with that remaining 4 ounces of starter that's ready to go is keep it at room temperature. Now, once you're ready to cook, you can remove from that what you need. If it's going to be more than 8 ounces, then you need to give it 2 feedings first so that you have enough for your recipe plus 4 ounces. You always wanna have that 4 ounces to keep, okay? So you're gonna feed that 4 ounces one more time, and then you're going to transfer it to a jar. Jar needs to be at least 4 ounces, so we could transfer it to here. Then you're going to feed it the regular feeding, 1 cup of flour, 1/2 cup of water. Let it rest at room temperature for several hours in its new home, the clean, sterilized jar, and then you will store it in your refrigerator. Now, once it's in the fridge, you do need to make sure that you feed it once per week. All right, so that's it for our yeast flour. So that's going to take several days. Now, I think the potatoes should be about ready, so let's check them. Okay, so they are tender. I can easily puncture them with a fork. So what I'm going to do is find something to strain with. I want to strain the potatoes out of the water, but I also want to keep the water. So don't discard the water, just strain the potatoes away from the water, all right? Okay, so I have the potatoes in here, and then I have the water, the potato water in here, all right? So I'm going to take my fork, or if you're lucky enough to have a potato masher at home, you can use that. What I'm gonna do is just mash the potatoes. We're keeping the skin on. And by the way, the skin has a lot of nutrition, so that's probably why we're keeping it on. Thinking about how am I going to get this in this tiny mouth of a jar. I think I'm going to need to grab a spoon. Okay, so I'm thinking this spoon will do well. Okay, so we're going to add in the, let's see, 1 teaspoon of sugar and 1 teaspoon of salt. So even though salt kills yeast, we do need it for the starter. So here's our teaspoon of sugar and our teaspoon of salt. I'm gonna go ahead and mix that. Okay, now we're supposed to let this sit until it reaches room temperature. So you don't want it to be hot, and it obviously is very hot because I just cooked it. So it's mashed, I mixed it with the salt and the sugar, and then once it's room temperature, I'm gonna take it and start putting it into the jar, just like this. I just wanted to do that to show you, but I don't actually wanna do it all yet because I don't wanna ruin my yeast. So we're gonna put it room temperature into the jar, and then you're going to add the water that you had until it equals 1 quart. It should equal 1 quart because this was 4 cups of water, right? So I kind of want to put the water in already, but you need to do it in the right order. So first the potatoes that are room temperature, then pour the water in until it equals 1 quart. Then you're going to cover it loosely and set it in a warm place for several days until it's fermented. So just like the fruit yeast that we're working on, once it's ready to go, you're going to see some bubbles. You're going to smell some fermentation, and it'll take several days for the potatoes. So there we go. I hope that helped you. These are 3 different ways that you can make some yeast from home without having to worry about going out and buying some. And now you can get started on your bread products. So good luck.